Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go my review of Wrestlemania 1. Starting off the evening, we go to our first match of the night. It is the Executioner versus Tito Santana. Again, it was a good opening matchup, back and forth matchup between both the Executioner and Tito Santana, with Tito keeping the pace of the match. Tito ultimately applies a figure four leg lock on the Executioner, and your winner of the match by submission is Tito Santana. Again, I thought this was a really good opening matchup for Wrestlemania. I mean, Wrestlemania obviously is the show of immortals. It's one of the Super Bowl, if you will, of professional wrestling. It's a spectacle, man. It's like the Super Bowl of professional wrestling. And this was a great opening matchup for Wrestlemania 1. So hats off to Tito Santana for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is King Kong Bundy versus Special Delivery Jones. Again, this was an okay matchup, relatively fast match. Bundy was keeping the pace of the match, with Bundy ultimately hitting a splash on Special Delivery Jones, hitting him for the 3, and your winner of the match is King Kong Bundy. Again, like I said, it was an okay matchup. This is pretty much a glorified squash match, literally. Again, hats off to King Kong Bundy for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Ricky Steamboat versus Matt Bourne. Again, it was a good matchup, back and forth matchup between both Ricky and Matt Bourne, with Ricky keeping the pace of the match. But Ricky ultimately hits a crossbody off the top rope on Matt Bourne, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Ricky Steamboat. Again, really good matchup. Hats off to Ricky Steamboat for getting the win in this match. Moving on from that, we go into our next match on the card. It is Brutus the Barber versus David Sammartino. Again, it was an okay matchup, back and forth matchup between both Brutus and David Sammartino. But the match ends up ending in a double countout due to the fact that I'm not sure who the manager was at the time of Brutus the Barber, but the manager of Brutus and Bruno Sammartino, the father of David Sammartino, got involved in this match. An all-out fight broke loose, and the crowd completely went crazy. You know, obviously Bruno Sammartino being the legend that he is, the crowd completely erupted, and an all-out brawl ensued. So, again, I wish it was a clean finish. And the way that Gorilla Monsoon was talking in this match, I believe he was talking to Jesse Ventura about this match on commentary. It was really like a who's who, like, you know, who's going to win. And if whoever won, their career was going to prosper, where the other person, if they were to lose, their career would go nowhere. Now, credit, the match ended in a double countout, but David Sammartino's career didn't go anywhere even remotely close to Bruno Sammartino's career. Obviously, the Barber kind of, you know, made a career for himself later down the road, obviously working with WWE and then in WCW. So, obviously, out of the two, Brutus had a better career than David Sammartino, but you know, in David's defense, I mean, those were some big shoes to fill, being, you know, Bruno Sammartino. I mean, that's like saying that Cody Rhodes or Dustin Rhodes would overshadow their father, Dusty. It's just not going to happen, man. You know, when you're a second-generation wrestler and you feel, and there's maybe a select few that maybe overshadowed their father in professional wrestling, Randy Orton being a big one. Bob Orton, great wrestler, but Randy Orton just took that and ran with it, and everybody knows who Randy Orton is. He's a big-time player in professional wrestling, where I don't think Bob Orton really was. And Bob Orton kind of really, he was a wrestler, but he more associated himself, not as a valet, but he was always hanging out with Piper. He was always hanging out with Paul Orndorff. And he just really didn't, I just feel like he didn't get a whole lot of matches out of Bob Orton. Not taking anything away, you know, from his athletic ability or him being a professional wrestler. It just, you didn't really see a whole lot of matches, in my honest opinion, with Bob Orton. It just didn't happen. But again, hats off to, I mean, both Barber and David Sammartino, because again, the match ended in a double countout. I wish it was a clean finish though, but again, it was a decent matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Greg the Hammer Valentine versus Junkyard Dog for the WWE Intercontinental Championship. Again, it was a good matchup, back and forth matchup between both Greg the Hammer Valentine and Junkyard Dog, with Junkyard keeping the pace of the match. Greg then hits a roll-up using the ropes. Referee counts 3. The match seems to end after that. Then Tito is here. Referee then reverses the call, and then Greg is counted out of the match. He does not return to the ring. So your winner of the match is Junkyard Dog, but I don't think he received the Intercontinental Championship due to a countout. Again, this match was actually pretty interesting, and I'm a big fan of Junkyard Dog. The gimmick was great, and honestly, you know, it would have been really cool to see him as Intercontinental Champion. The fans gravitated towards Junkyard Dog. The gimmick was great. It would have been great to see him as Intercontinental Champion, but unfortunately that did not happen. But again, hats off to the Junkyard Dog for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the U.S. Express, which consists of Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham versus the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Koloff for the WWE Tag Team Championships. I thought this match was really good. It was a back-and-forth matchup between both teams, with the U.S. Express keeping the pace of the match. But Iron Sheik hits Windham with a cane, with the referee being distracted, pins him for the 3, and your winners of the match, and at that time, the new WWE Tag Team Champions, are the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Koloff. Or Volkov, I'm sorry. Again, it was a decent match. I wish, you know, it was a clean finish. You know, obviously Iron Sheik likes to pull some antics here and there, but the U.S. Express, man, I was kind of surprised, you know, who was in that team. You know, when it was initially announced, I was like, you know, who is the U.S. Express? But then you get to see Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham as part of this tag team known as U.S. Express, man. It was a decent tag team, man. It really was. But hats off to the Iron Sheik and Nikolai for getting the win in this match, even though I wish it was a clean finish. But hats off to them for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Andre the Giant versus John Studd in a career versus body slam match with a $15,000 bounty. This match was really, really good. I thought it was a really good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Andre and John Studd, with Andre keeping the pace of the match. But ultimately, at the end, Andre ends up hitting a body slam on John Studd, and your winner of the match is Andre the Giant. A couple of things I'll say about this match is, number one, the match itself. A lot of people don't like gimmick matches, and I'm not a big fan of them either. But this match, as far as the gimmick itself, was pretty cool. Big John Studd, you know, was a big man, very big man. He was a unit, man. I mean, the guy, you know, definitely underrated in professional wrestling. Andre, everybody knows who Andre the Giant is. You know, the 8th wonder of the world. Just to see this match, unfold and see what was going to happen. I mean, Andre was destroying John Studd. I mean, to the point where I think it was in a documentary where after this match, John Studd was so scared after this match that he ran out of the arena and left, and he was off the scene. He was scared for his life in that match. And Andre really didn't like to have somebody come in and think that they were going to overshadow Andre, his physique, his stature, and having a guy like John Studd kind of came close to that to Andre at that time, and Andre just was not a big fan of that. And again, you know, Andre's an absolute legend. And to see Bobby Heenan ringside, you know, he grabs the money, and Andre's throwing the money up in the air for the fans, and then Bobby Heenan, you know, steals the bag. It was just a great match, man. A lot of gimmick matches are not that good, but this one was really, really cool to see. And again, one of the most craziest WrestleMania moments I've ever seen. So again, hats off to Andre the Giant for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Wendy Richter versus Leilani Kai for the WWE Women's Championship. Number one, this right here is, to me, is historic. This is the first ever women's championship that's defended at WrestleMania, which is historic in itself. The match was a good matchup. It was a back-and-forth matchup between both Richter and Leilani Kai, with Wendy Richter keeping the pace of the match. But Leilani Kai hits a crossbody, but Wendy somehow turns it into a roll-up, pins her for the 3, and your winner of the match, and at that time, new WWE Women's Champion, is Wendy Richter. Again, this was a good matchup. And like I said, this was literally the first ever Women's Championship match at WrestleMania. That right there alone is historic. And I believe it was when Wendy Richter came out to the ring, she was accompanied by Cyndi Lauper. I'm sure she was a big musical act at that time. Around WrestleMania 1, so the crowd completely went crazy when Wendy Richter came to the ring, and she was a crowd favorite. I mean, Leilani Kai came out with the Fabulous Moolah, who's a humongous heel in professional wrestling, so obviously she got some boos, but this was a decent matchup for what it's worth. And again, hats off to Wendy Richter for getting the win in that match, and at that time becoming the new WWE Women's Champion. Moving on from that, we go into the main event of WrestleMania 1. It is Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff versus Hulk Hogan and Mr. T. Now, with these two teams, obviously Piper and Paul Orndorff came down to the ring with Bob Orton. He also had a cast on his arm at this time. Hogan and Mr. T came down to the ring with none other than Jimmy Superfly Snuka. Again, the match was great. To see Roddy Piper and Mr. T face-to-face in the middle of the ring was fantastic. It was a back-and-forth matchup between both teams with Roddy Piper keeping the pace of the match. Bob Orton does get involved in the match. He goes to hit Hogan off the top rope with the cast, but missed, ends up hitting Paul Orndorff. Hogan then goes for the cover, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Hulk Hogan and Mr. T. A couple things I'll say about this match is, number one, a great main event. Hogan and Piper were really big rivals throughout Hogan's career. They had phenomenal matches. And yes, Hogan got the win in this match, but Piper usually got the better half of wins against Hogan. And Hogan was Piper was a big rival to Hogan. Piper obviously being the heel. Piper's Pit was a big segment that they had with WWE back in the day. Paul Orndorff definitely being the heel. Hogan being the babyface, and Mr. T. I mean, everybody loved Mr. T, from him being in the A-Team as B.A. Baracus. I mean, it was a spectacle, man, and this is exactly what WrestleMania was all about. It still is to this day. It's a spectacle. Now, credit, maybe nowadays it's not, the matches are not, important as they used to be. But back in the day, for example, WrestleMania 2's main event, I believe, was Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy in a steel cage, where Hogan was hurt. His ribs were hurt, and Bundy was built, and he was a powerhouse. I mean, he was in there to destroy you and make sure you didn't wrestle again. And it just makes it for, great matches. WrestleMania nowadays is just more about the spectacle than the actual matches. And I think a lot of fans are really salivating at the fact that they're hoping that they get another WrestleMania like that. We just haven't got a WrestleMania like that, in my honest opinion, for a very long time. But again, this is WrestleMania 1, man. Every time I give these pay-per-views, I always give these pay-per-views a rating from 1 out of 10. It's WrestleMania 1. You cannot give this WrestleMania anything more than maybe an 8.5, close to 9. And that might be biased, and some people might not agree with me on that, but this is the show of immortals, ladies and gentlemen. This is the show that created the streak with The Undertaker, where Undertaker would go into WrestleMania, and, every time he got to a match, he beat everybody, up until Brock Lesnar. But, this pay-per-view alone made The Undertaker immortal. Everybody wanted to conquer the streak, and it was a hell of a streak, to be honest with you. WrestleMania is synonymous with Undertaker and vice versa. And, WrestleMania has definitely had its moments, man, and gave the fans exactly what they wanted. What was it, WrestleMania 6, Warrior versus Hogan, title versus title? I mean, that main event alone made Ultimate Warrior more known than he ever has been up to that point and beyond. It was a phenomenal match. It was a great matchup. You can make yourself practically immortal with a win in a big match at WrestleMania. So you had to give this an 8, 8.5, because WWE didn't know what they had at this time. It was WrestleMania 1. It was their first show. And here we are now with still having WrestleMania, and they're putting on phenomenal matches for years to come. You know what I mean? It's just fantastic stuff. It was great to see. And the main event was awesome. And again, hats off to Hogan and Mr. T for getting the win in this matchup. But like I said, I had to give this maybe an 8 or 8.5 for WrestleMania. But this is my review of WrestleMania 1. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.